Webster defines crunch time as a critical moment or period, like the end of a game, when decisive action is needed. Every sports fan knows this time in the game. Your palms sweat just a little more, your heart races just a little bit faster, and you live and die with every play until the final seconds tick off the clock and you're either celebrating a victory or disappointed by the defeat. The team at Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network understands just how critical these moments are. For us, it begins as soon as the next set of games are on the board. We evaluate the opening lines and any breaking news throughout the week. We cover each game inside and out, whether it's from inside the locker room to a huddle down on the field, the court, or the ice. We take you inside the meeting room with scouts, coaches, and executives. We have our fingers on the pulse of all the sports that we cover: the National Hockey League, NBA, college basketball, college football, and the National Football League. We are the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network, and we're here to help you find your sports advantage. After all the data has been crunched, we then turn it over to Kenneth for the best analysis around. His unique perspective in both understanding the data and how it applies to the game and how you win is the Crunch Time Sports Advantage. Are you ready? The Crunch Time Jet is fueled and ready for takeoff, and the Crunch Time Express is about to leave the station. Your VIP pass has been approved, so all aboard.
Welcome to the 2024 College Football Team Autopsy Report. An autopsy report is a document that summarizes the findings of an autopsy, an examination of a body after death. It includes details of the examination, tests, and observations performed, as well as the cause and manner of death. Just like a real autopsy report, the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network College Football Autopsy Report examines a team's body of work after the season has concluded. This report includes a review of the team's season win total and whether they met expectations, key offensive, defensive, and special teams metrics that shaped the season, a deep dive into coaching decisions, including situational play and fourth down aggressiveness, a final season grade, evaluating execution, performance in key moments, and consistency, the final verdict, analyzing what went right, what went wrong, and what must be fixed for 2025. With the 2024 season in the rearview mirror, it's time to examine the patient. To present the findings, we have called in our Chief Medical Examiner and Senior Analyst, Kenneth.
And welcome into the 2024 Team Autopsy Report for the Purdue Boilermakers. Always great to be back with you here doing these team reviews. And we're going to start there with the Purdue Boilermakers 2024 season, because no matter how you look at it, this indeed was one of the worst teams in all of college football last year. And folks, we're going to start there with the head coaching position, because we know at the end of this season in 2024, the Purdue Boilermakers made a head coaching change, firing Ron Walters. And we know they went out to UNLV to get the head coach, Barry Odom. So bringing him back to the Big Ten, or bringing him to the Big Ten, I should say. So let's take a look at why this program made the move in relieving Ron Walters of his duties. And if you're joining us on our YouTube channel or streaming this on our Twitter feed at Crunchtime VIP, I want to say thank you for joining us, as well as all of you that are listening on your favorite podcast platform. Don't worry, anything that I reference on the screen for those viewers, I got you covered here. So 2 years. Normally, I would say not enough time to evaluate the head coach, but after a 4-8 season in 2023 and following that up with a 1-11 campaign last year, 5-19, this team was not showing growth there for Ron Walters. So I can absolutely understand them making the move just after after 2 years. And we're going to start right there with the betting window. Okay, so this team opened in June with a season win total of 4.5. Folks, if you took the under in that, you were already at the pay window before we got to November. So definitely did not get the job done there. Now, when we take a look at our composite win total in season, there are 3 very different but also highly predictive statistical numbers that we look at that makes up that composite win total. And we had the Purdue Boilermakers at a 2.2. So our numbers said that we felt like Purdue could have squeezed out one more win. Now, would that have been enough to save Ron Walters' job? Don't think so, but it's always fascinating to look at that. Excuse me. Now, when we look at a team's overall schedule, we look at it in 2 very different components, both equally, but very different. A team's strength of schedule and their strength of record. Now, your strength of schedule, when you play in a big-time conference, you only control about 20 to 25% of your schedule. Basically, look at it this way. Who's on your non-conference schedule? Because your in-conference schedule, that is a complete luck of the draw there, who you're going to draw as far as your in-conference opponent. As far as your strength of record, that's looking at how did your opponents do during the regular season. Think of it this way. The better their win-loss record, the more difficult your strength of record is going to reflect that. So for the Purdue Boilermakers, 0.549. That was the 15th toughest strength of schedule in college football last year. When we look at their strength of record, their opponent's win percentage, as we'll refer to it, 0.674. Third toughest in college football last year when we look at it that way. So not only were their opponents highly power ranked, their records are absolutely going to reflect that. So you're going to see a lot of teams with 8+ wins on this Purdue schedule. And for those of you that are watching, I'm going to go through that schedule right now. Now, their first opponent was Indiana State, an FCS opponent. Then their next opponent, Notre Dame. The Irish were 11-1. Oregon State was 5-7. Nebraska 6-6. Wisconsin 5-7. Illinois was 9-3. We know the Ducks ran the table during the regular season, finishing with a 12-0 record. Northwestern was 4-8. Ohio State was 10-2. Penn State 11-1. Michigan State was 5-7. And of course, America's team, the Indiana Hoosiers, in their in-state finale was 11-1. I said I felt like there was a game that they possibly could have won that they lost. Look no further than that game against Northwestern, where they lost that game 26-20. Outside of that, this team was absolutely boat race for most of the season. And the most surprising data point that I'm looking at on their schedule is they held 3 teams under 30 points last year. Conversely, they gave up 50 or more to 4 teams last year. And neither one of those teams were Oregon or Ohio State, if you think about it. They gave up 66 to Notre Dame. They gave up 52 to Wisconsin. They gave up 50 to Illinois. And now that I think about it, losing that game 50-49, that would probably be the more likely choice of a game that they should have won that they lost. So I'm going to flip that. That's the game that they probably should have won. They gave up 66 in the season finale to Indiana. So they gave up 60 burgers twice, 50 burgers 2 times. And then Penn State, Oregon and Ohio State, wow. Just look at the margin of victories in those games. It is just astonishing that this team got one win last year, and it was against an FCS opponent. That's why you make the move at the head coaching spot. Now, let's take a look at how good were the defenses that Purdue's offense went up against last year. We'll use a baseline number of 68 because that's how many Power 4 teams we had last year. So, teams that were inside of that top 68 defensively, Notre Dame, 9th best defense, power ranked defense for us last year. Nebraska was 14th, Wisconsin 34th, Wisconsin 36th, Illinois 54th, Oregon 10th. Buckeyes, the number one power ranked defense in our metrics last year. Penn State, not far behind at 19th. Michigan State, 63rd. And then America's team in Indiana, 27th. So this team was facing, on average, a defense that would have probably been ranked about 37th. And when you think about that, they played the Beavers of Oregon State, who were 105th, and they still had a average of 37th. You're talking about a team that's probably worst case scenario 9-3, potentially. Yeah, I would say 9-3. So that's the caliber of defenses on average that this team would have been facing last season. So a gauntlet, to say the least. Now let's dive into the offense here. I'm going to give you the NCAA average, Purdue's statistical number in that category, and then I'm going to give you our adjusted number for that category. So last year, and you can expect some of these offensive numbers are going to be really horrible. Last year, average team scored 28 points per game. Purdue averaged 15.8 points per game, a full 12 points less than the average. When we adjust for opponent, does tick up a little bit to 19.4. You're still talking about well over a touchdown difference from the average team last year. Passing yards per game, NCAA averaged 227 yards per game. Purdue was at 184 yards per game. When we adjust for opponent, goes up a tick to 193. When we look at rushing offense, the average team last year, 160 yards per game. Purdue was at 115. Now, when we adjust for opponent, that does go up significantly to 150 yards per game. So this team was a lot better adjusted wise than what their raw accounting stats show. Average total offense per team last year, 387 yards per game. Purdue was at 299. When we adjust for opponent, goes up to 343 yards per game. So an improvement of 43 yards there when we adjust that. Now, let's dive deep into the numbers here. And folks, these are going to be some really terrifying numbers. Average team drives ending with a score, about 40%. Purdue drives ending with a score, touchdown or field goal, 31%. Drives ending with a touchdown, average team last year, 29%. Boilermakers were at 23%. An adjusted third down conversion, average team last year, 39%. Purdue, adjusted third down conversion rate, 31%. Team struggled on third down, struggled to put points on the board. Hard to not see how those numbers don't correlate with each other. You're bad on third downs. You can't put the ball in the end zone. You're not going to average a lot of points. This team last season allowed 28 sacks, which was about 4 more than the average team gave up last year. and committed 19 turnovers. Got to be honest with you, I thought that committed turnovers would be even higher than it was. So you got to look and say that was a little bit more impressive for them not to commit more turnovers than what they actually did. Now, let's look at our 3 E's. And these are how effective, explosive, and efficient was your offense last year. You can imagine a team that finished with 1 win would be outside of the top 100 in all 3 of those categories. You would be correct. 120th effective offense last year, 101st in explosive plays, and 110th in efficiency. The Purdue Boilermakers ended the regular season as our 112th ranked offense out of 134 teams. Not good at all. Let's take a look at the defense now. And while that's on the screen, and I got a couple of extra minutes, let me talk about the quarterback position. And folks, when you hear these numbers, you can understand why Purdue won exactly 1 game against an FCS opponent. Hudson Card, starting quarterback, 10 games last year, completed 58% of his passes, 1,641 yards. He averaged 164 yards per game passing, 9 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 6.6 yards per attempt. When you're that low, 1, you're not pushing the ball down the field, and then 2, your wide receivers are not making any explosive plays for you. And you got to have better production than that. Trying to see if the run game produced anything. Devin Maccabee, 138 rushing attempts in 12 games, 687 yards, 5 yards per attempt, 4 touchdowns. Could only muster 57 yards per game rushing. I think we're going to kind of see the same thing there with their leading wide receiver, which was their tight end, Max Clare, 51 receptions, 685 yards, 13.4 yards per reception, 4 touchdowns. He averaged 57 yards per game. When you look at their leading wide receiver in Jerron Tibbs, 12 games, he only caught 25 passes, 305 yards. You have no production at the skill positions. Hard to win games at this level of college football. Now, let's take a look at how good were the offenses that Purdue went up against, Purdue's defense went up against last year. We'll stick with that baseline number of 68. How many of those offenses were inside of that top 68? The Fighting Irish were our 4th power-ranked offense last year. Nebraska was 67th. Wisconsin, 66th. Illinois, 45th. Oregon was 11th. Ohio State was 8th. Penn State was 48th. And Indiana was 3rd. You're talking about an average of 50. That's being drugged down because 3 of their opponents were outside of the top 90. Oregon State was 96th. Northwestern, 101st. Michigan State, 103rd. You're talking about an offense that would have probably belonged to a 7-5 team there. So there were opportunities, but this Purdue offense was shut out 3 times last year. Against Notre Dame, they were held to single digits. That can be said against Wisconsin. So you're talking about 5 games where they could not even crack 10 points. Hard to win games in college football or any level of football. Can't put up more than 10 points in a game. Let's give you the defensive metrics numbers here, and then I'm going to give you the splits. Okay, so defensively, you can imagine these numbers are going to be radically bad in a lot of areas. I'm going to give you their average in the category and then our adjusted number. 39.9 points per game allowed. When we adjust for opponent, it does go down to 34.2. That's still almost 10 points more than the average team was giving up last year. As far as passing yards per game allowed, 253 yards per game. When we adjust for opponent, do see some improvement there to 239 yards per game. The run defense was horrible. 200 yards per game allowed. When we adjust for opponent, it's still sitting at 195 yards per game. Opponents averaged 453 yards per game in total offense. When we adjust for opponent, it's still north of 400 yards, 434 yards per game. And expect to see some of that same numbers here once I get into some of the advanced numbers here. Opponents' drives adjusted, ending with a score 49.5%. So basically 1 out of every 2 drives for their opponents were ending with some kind of score. Their opponents' drives ending with touchdowns, 39%. Again, significantly higher than the average team last year. And their opponents converting on third downs. When we adjust for opponents, 46.5% conversion rate. You can't get your opponents off the field. You can't keep them out of the end zone. That's problematic. 21 sacks last year, about 4 less than the average team. This team was horrible on fourth downs. Their opponents converted 12 out of 16 attempts last year, 75%. More than 22% higher than the average team last year. And this team could not force turnovers. Only 5 turnovers by their defense last year. That is a recipe for not being able to win ball games. And as far as their 3 E's, these are some of the worst numbers that I've seen in any of the Power 4 teams. 129th effective defense, 125th in explosive plays allowed, 119th in defensive efficiency. This was the 125th ranked defense for us in college football. Their special teams, poor kicking game, okay punting game. Field goal percentage of 57%, you're talking about almost 20 percentage points below the average last year. 5 punts per game, almost 44 yards per punt. So their punter did everything that he could to flip the field there last year, but this team was really bad in 2 full phases of the game. Minus 14 turnover differential. 131st in college football last year. Five penalties per game, 47 yards in penalties. That was actually better than the average team last year. So that was a positive note there that this team wasn't beating themselves with penalties. When we look at the head coach, 0-3 in one-score games, 0-8 against quality opponents. 10.9% going for it on fourth downs. That was 109th out of 144 qualifying head coaches last year, which makes sense because they were only 5 of 18 conversion rate of 28% on fourth down. So wise not to go for it on fourth down when your team absolutely cannot convert. Let's take a look at the splits, folks, and it's not going to be hard to kind of recognize where these numbers are going to go. So we're going to really just kind of roll through these. Their one win was against an FCS opponent, so I'm not even going to cover that. In their 11 losses, this offense was scoring 12.7 points per game, 170 yards per game in those losses on 27 attempts, 6.4 yards per attempt, 11.8 yards per completion. They were running the ball 29 times a game for only 103 yards, 3.6 yards per rushing attempt in those losses. Their conversion rate on third downs, let's call it 30% on third downs and 28% on fourth downs, 18 turnovers in those 11 losses. Let's take a look at the defensive splits, especially just there for their losses. Again, you step up in weight class, you're getting punched out and allowing 43.5 points per game, 271 yards per game passing on 29 attempts, 9.3 yards per attempt, 14 yards per completion. Their opponents were absolutely dominant on the ground, 39 rushing attempts per game for 209 yards per game rushing, 5.4 yards per rushing attempt in those losses. Their opponents' third down conversion rate, 49%, 75% on fourth downs, only forced 5 turnovers. So no surprise there when you're talking about a one-win team and that one win coming against an FCS opponent. Let's go ahead and get to the final grade and the final verdict for this team. There's no surprise in the final grade for the Purdue Boilermakers. They received an F from us. One win on the schedule, and like I said, that coming against an FCS opponent, completely dominated in all phases of the game last year. This team needed to make a change at the head coaching position, and rightfully so. They were able to do that. So let's give you some keys here for what Purdue needs to do in 2025, because the final verdict is this was one of the worst teams in football last year, failing to compete in most games with an ineffective offense, a horrendous defense, and an absolutely abysmal turnover margin there. This team must make major changes to avoid another disastrous season. That was the final verdict. In our final minute and a half here, let me give you 3 keys here for Purdue going into the 2025 season. Develop more of a balanced offense. Establishing a run game to ease the pressure on the passing game is first and foremost. Key number 2, this team has got to get more explosive playmakers on the offense, whether that's at the running back position, whether that is at the wide receiver position. This team has to get more juice on the offensive side of the ball. Key number 3, defensive execution. And folks, we're talking strictly fundamentals here. This team has got to tackle better. They got to cover better. They got to have better situational awareness if this team is going to take any steps forward in 2025. If Purdue can focus on these 3 key areas, this team can absolutely see an improvement in their win-loss record in 2025.
Thank you for tuning into this podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and our deep dive into all things college football. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like this video and hit that subscribe button. You can follow us on Twitter at CrunchTimeVIP for updates, insights, and more content. And make sure to visit our website at CrunchTimeSportsAdvantage.com for in-depth blogs, game previews, and information about our Crunch Time Express handicapping packages. Thanks again for listening, And we'll see you next time for our next patient on the 2024 College Football Autopsy Report.